Have you ever wondered why some people don't need to try, don't need to say much, don't need to prove anything, and yet everything seems to come to them naturally? Opportunities open, people are drawn to them. The atmosphere changes when they walk into a room. It is not because they are perfect. It is not because they are persuasive or highly experienced. It's because they think differently. They operate from an inner center that most people have never touched. There is a way of thinking that completely transforms how the world responds to you. Not positive thinking, not a success mindset, not even self-improvement techniques. It is a deep shift within the place where you stop reacting to life and begin radiating an inner steadiness so stable that everything else has to adjust to it. This video does not come to teach you how to attract people or optimize yourself. It comes to show you something far deeper. The way of thinking that makes you no longer have to chase anything, because what is meant for you finds its way to you. You are likely not watching this video by accident. Perhaps life itself is bringing you to the precise moment where you need to understand this. True magnetism does not lie in effort, but in how you exist. If you are ready, we will begin the journey into how thinking like this changes everything around you right now. When you are no longer a reaction to the world, there is a very subtle moment that few people notice. The moment you walk into a room, say nothing, do nothing, yet the atmosphere shifts. Not because you try to impress, not because you perform correctly, but because something radiates from you, an inner state that is steady, quiet, not urgently seeking feedback. This is not magnetism coming from behavior, but the natural result of an inner structure standing firmly. And from the way you are in the world, the difference between reacting and radiating begins to form. Most people live in a reactive state. They wake up and unconsciously ask, what does the world want from me today? What should I say to avoid discomfort? This is the ego operating from fear of losing its position. In this state, a person is not truly present in their own life. They live as a reflex, always half a beat behind the movement of the world. Radiating is completely different. Radiating does not ask, what should I do to fit in? It exists as an inner order that already has its own place. Just as the sun does not try to shine, yet light still flows outward. When you look outside, you dream. When you look inside, you awaken. When your thinking is no longer constantly turned outward, searching for feedback, when your attention returns inward, a very quiet awareness begins to form. When the inner world is no longer stretched thin by outside signals, the world itself adjusts its rhythm around that stability. Not because you influence others, but because you are no longer pulled off center by them. Think of someone you have met. They did not speak much, did not try to appear knowledgeable, did not seek attention. But when they sat down, you found yourself calming. You wanted to speak slower, be less defensive, perform less. What was happening? Not communication skills, not superficial charm, but the fact that they were not reacting to you. They were present. And that very presence, which did not need adjustment, created a psychological space stable enough for everything else to naturally reorganize. This is the state in which inner energy is no longer fragmented. When you are no longer constantly monitoring someone's reaction or gaze, your energy is no longer pulled outward. It stays with you. And when energy stays, it begins to radiate naturally. Magnetism forms not from effort, but from the absence of leakage. A woman once shared that whenever she sent a message, she wasn't truly done after pressing send. A part of her mind remained on the other side of the screen waiting. If the message wasn't answered quickly, her mind started spinning. Did I say something wrong? Should I do something else? She didn't realize that every loop of thought was a moment she left herself. When she began to stop, not to appear cold, but to actually stay with her own state, something strange happened. The pace of the relationship changed. Not because of tactics, but because her energy was no longer being pulled outward. She was not reacting, she was present. People do not build magnetism by trying to be right, but by not being pushed out of alignment with their own existence. When you no longer have to constantly adjust yourself to the environment, you become a stable point. And in a world operating mostly on reflex, stable points naturally carry weight. It is important to be clear, radiating is not indifference. It is not "I don't need anyone." It is the state of thinking that does not require external validation to feel real. You still feel, still listen, but you no longer lose your inner center every time something outside shifts. And from this way of thinking, you begin to attract, not because you want to, but because you are no longer leaking energy outward. If you suddenly realize you have lived in reactive mode for a long time with people, with expectations, with social attention, try something simple today. Before responding to anything, pause for just one breath and ask yourself, without needing to answer, am I radiating or am I being pulled? That single moment of awareness is already the first step for everything to begin finding its way to you. If you have lived in reflex mode for too long, you know how exhausting it is. And if you have ever had even a tiny moment of reclaiming your center, share it below in the comments. A single honest story of yours could become a mirror, helping someone else realize where they are on their own journey. There is an uncomfortable truth many people do not want to face. Much of our magnetism is lost not because we are inadequate, but because we have become accustomed to quietly betraying ourselves in the smallest details. Not betrayal in a dramatic or moral sense, but the subtle moments when we say it's fine to something that inside we know is not right. Saying what is pleasant instead of what is true. Choosing the safe path instead of the right one. Nodding when the entire body is resisting. These moments seem harmless, even praised by society as polite, mature, considerate. But this is exactly where energy begins to withdraw. Within each person exists a center deeper than the everyday self. This deeper self does not argue, does not bargain, does not need justification to exist. It knows only one thing: what is true for this being and what is not. Each time your surface self, which manages daily life, goes against that inner knowing to please others, avoid loss, or protect image, a silent fracture forms. Every time you betray your inner truth, your deeper self withdraws energy from you. No punishment, no judgment, just withdrawal. The self is not only the center, but also the whole circle which embraces both conscious and unconscious. It is the center of this totality. And when this happens, the first thing to disappear is not success or relationships, but the feeling of authenticity. You still speak, act, appear, but something inside becomes thinner. Others may not be able to articulate it, but they feel it clearly. There is a very slight mismatch between your words and your presence. That tiny misalignment collapses your magnetism. Think of a very ordinary example. A person works in an environment whose core values they no longer believe in. Every morning they still go, still attend meetings, still smile at the right moments. But inside they know they are living off center. Not because the job is bad, but because it is no longer right for them. At first they convince themselves, just push a little longer. Everyone feels this way. But the longer it continues, the more tired they become in a way that cannot be explained. Strangely, people around them also stop approaching them for deeper conversations or genuine connection. No one explicitly turns away, but their magnetism disappears. Not because their skills changed, but because they are not aligned with themselves. Imagine carrying a compass, but every time it points north, you turn in another direction because that road looks harder. You can still walk, but you must constantly check and correct. The person who does not negotiate with their true self is different. They do not need to repeatedly convince themselves that they are on the right path. And the absence of that inner negotiation creates a profound sense of trustworthiness. Modern science reflects this as well. Research on cognitive dissonance shows that when behavior contradicts core values, the brain must use extra energy to reduce inner tension. Conversely, when thoughts, feelings, and actions align, the nervous system becomes more regulated, the voice steadier, the gaze less reactive. These subtle changes are enough for others to sense certainty, even if they cannot explain it. People are not drawn to those who are merely likable, but to those who operate from an inner axis that is not divided. When you no longer distort your inner truth to fit outer circumstances, you emit a rare signal, vibrant coherence. That signal creates a gravitational pull not only in relationships but in work, in career choices, in the way life opens or closes in front of you. Success does not come to the most correct person, but to the person who does not disrupt their internal system. From that state, you naturally attract everything. Not superficial charm, but a deep resonance between you and life. The right opportunities appear at the right time. The right people enter with the right rhythm. Decisions become clearer. It is no longer radiating from mere presence as in the previous section, but the flow of success arising from inner alignment. And in a world full of subtle compromises, the person who does not negotiate with themselves is not only rare, they become the point around which life naturally turns. If you no longer negotiate with your true self, if you have begun to stand more firmly inside your choices, then a natural question emerges. Why is it that even when we live correctly, we can still feel pulled, obsessed, or dependent on certain people, certain opportunities, or certain images of success outside ourselves? Here, a deeper mechanism of the unconscious is at work. Projection. Human beings do not see the world as it is, but through the parts of themselves that have not yet become conscious. Whenever you feel that someone has something powerful, something magnetic to the point that you feel smaller or pulled toward them, it is very likely that you are not only seeing them, but a part of yourself that you have not yet claimed. That attraction is a sign that your energy is located outside you. Projection occurs when your qualities, strengths, potentials, or even shadows are not lived fully within you, and so they are placed onto someone else. You see in them the confidence you have not expressed, the freedom you have not allowed yourself, or the authority you believe you lack. And from that moment, you begin searching outside for what actually belongs inside. I once heard the story of a woman named Alina. She was always drawn to very confident, decisive men, the kind who walked into a room and everything seemed to revolve around them. Every time she met such a man, Alina felt both admiration and smallness, as if strength and success lived on the other side. She believed that if such a man chose her, validated her, then her life would finally open. But Alina did not realize that what she was seeing in them was the very strength she had not yet allowed herself to live. She had handed over her power of choosing and leading while she herself hesitated and deferred. When Alina began to see this, she stopped trying to impress or seek validation. She began choosing for herself, saying yes and no according to what felt true. The shift was rapid. She was no longer obsessed with one person or one image of success, and balanced relationships and fitting opportunities began appearing, not because she learned how to attract, but because she reclaimed what she had once placed outside herself. This has been echoed in art and mythology as well. Consider the story of Narcissus in Greek mythology. Narcissus did not love another person. He loved the reflection of himself on the water. But because he did not realize it was himself, he became trapped in obsession, unable to move, eventually withering beside the very water that reflected him. This story is not a moral warning against self-love, but a profound metaphor for projection. When you do not recognize that what you seek is actually a part of yourself, you become chained to an external object and lose your own living flow. This is why reclaiming projections is the greatest transformation of magnetism. Because when you take back what you have placed onto others, your energetic structure changes entirely. It is the moment you ask honestly, what is it about this person that attracts me so much? And what part of myself have I abandoned? When that question is asked, energy shifts. You no longer need others to carry your strength for you. You no longer seek completeness outside. And for that very reason, you begin attracting from a completely different place. Not from lack, but from the wholeness being integrated within. And here lies the key to magnetism in this section. When you stop seeking power outside yourself, you stop emitting signals of deficiency. You no longer chase people, opportunities, or images of success to complete you. Instead, you begin living from the fullness that is gradually returning. From that position, you attract everything differently. People come because they feel you do not need them to be whole. Opportunities open because you are not clinging to outcomes. Success arrives because your energy is no longer dispersed in comparison or misplaced admiration. If you have ever had a very quiet moment where you looked at someone and realized that what attracts you is not actually them, but a sleeping part of yourself, leave the word reclaim in the comments. Not to prove anything, but as a whisper to yourself, I am beginning to take back what has always belonged to me. If you have begun reclaiming the energy you once projected outward, if you no longer seek power in others or in external images of success, then a subtle shift will occur. You start feeling tired of the crowd's pace. Not because you are weaker, but because you no longer need to run. And at this point, another question arises. What happens when you stop living according to the rhythm of the collective unconscious? The state of being swept into the crowd is where people act and desire not from their true being, but from fear of being left behind. The mass crushes out the insight and reflection that are still possible with the individual. The crowd is always in a hurry because it has no inner axis to guide itself. When you live at this rhythm, no matter what you achieve, your energy is still consumed by trying to keep up. The magnetic person is not the one who moves faster than the crowd, but the one who is no longer pulled into its run. When you do not react to urgency, when you do not engage in comparison, when you are not triggered by judgment, you begin moving at your own pace. Not a slow pace from stagnation, but a pace aligned with your nervous system. And paradoxically, it is precisely when you stop trying to keep up that people begin to notice you. I once heard the story of a woman named Maya in a close friend group. Whenever the group gathered, the conversation quickly spun around comparison. Who's dating whom? Who's getting married? Who bought a house? Who is moving ahead? Maya used to get caught in that rhythm. She would speak quickly so she wouldn't fall behind, smile and nod at the right moments, then leave feeling drained without knowing why. Then one day, Maya stopped doing that. When others talked, she listened more slowly. When the conversation shifted into comparison, she did not rush to prove she was doing fine. She simply remained, neither avoiding nor matching the group's frantic pace. Strangely, the atmosphere softened. Someone turned to ask how Maya felt, not to compare but to listen. Maya did not try to become the center, but by refusing the collective rhythm, she became the person who brought calm. Maya did not change her friends. She simply stepped out of the unconscious rhythm, and her position in the group naturally transformed. The one who is not pulled into the collective mindset becomes an anchor for others, because the unconscious always seeks stability. In a world full of stimulation, the person who does not react becomes a place where others' nervous systems can rest. And wherever rest exists, magnetism naturally follows. Imagine a river rushing after heavy rain. Everything on the surface is swept away quickly. But in the middle of the river stands a large rock, unmoving. It does not fight the flow nor move with it. And because it stands still, the water slows around it. A person who lives slower than the collective unconscious is the same. You need not convince anyone or proclaim anything. Your presence alone alters the rhythm around you. Living slower than the collective unconscious does not mean withdrawing from life or acting above others. It simply means the collective rhythm no longer determines yours. You do not need an opinion about everything. You do not need to respond to every stimulation. You do not need to prove you are on the right path. When you stop being pulled, your energy returns. And from here, you attract everything. When you think like this takes on a very specific meaning, when you are no longer in a constantly triggered state, your nervous system stabilizes, your attention deepens, and your decisions become more accurate. You no longer miss opportunities out of haste, nor rush into things that are not meant for you. The right opportunities find you because you are calm enough to recognize them. People are drawn to you because they feel safe near you. Success appears not as a chase, but as the natural result of no longer running out of sync. The individual becomes truly themselves only when they separate from the collective unconscious. In a noisy world, the one who is not noisy becomes rare. In a hurried world, the one who is not hurried becomes trustworthy. And from that very quiet difference, everything begins to find its way to you without force. Once you have learned not to be pulled by the hurried rhythm of the crowd, the next step in magnetism reaches a deeper layer. The need to control the outcome, because when you are no longer chasing others, the ego shifts to its final strategy for maintaining a sense of safety. It wants to decide exactly how everything must unfold. And it is in that exact moment that magnetism begins to collapse without most people realizing it. Wherever the ego wants to force life to follow its plan, the unconscious becomes suffocated. The unconscious operates according to a natural order, unhurried and unforced. But the ego is the opposite. It wants to know in advance, wants reassurance, wants control. And this very need makes a person lose one of their strongest sources of magnetism, freedom from outcomes. Where wisdom reigns, there is no conflict between thinking and feeling. When you want to control outcomes, you force thinking over feeling. But when you release the deeper intelligence and you can finally operate, you can see this clearly in relationships. Imagine a woman named Lina. She enters a relationship with the sincere desire for deep connection. But she constantly monitors every reaction of the man. Will this message make him like me more? Was that sentence cute enough? If I stay silent, will he leave? By trying to control his reactions, she alters her entire energetic structure. Ease and lightness disappear, and magnetism, which exists only in freedom, begins to dissolve. Only when Lana truly released the need for the outcome to follow her expectations did she discover something surprising. The relationship became clearer. The man either genuinely moved toward her or naturally stepped away, but this time neither direction made her lose herself. Imagine placing a small wooden boat onto a stream. If you hold it too tightly, you will constantly predict and worry about where it will drift. But if you release it just enough, the boat does not disappear. It begins moving according to the natural rhythm of the current. Life works the same way. You are not asked to be passive, but invited into the state of cooperating with the unconscious, where a deeper current guides what is right in ways you cannot calculate. A very clear example of this mindset is Keanu Reeves. When his career entered a decline, instead of trying to control his image or cling to fame like many others in Hollywood, he stepped back. He did not chase every role, did not appear at every event, did not try to prove anything. He simply accepted projects that felt true to him and lived the rest of his life quietly. That letting go made him a different kind of presence. Not loud, not manipulating public reaction. And the paradox is that precisely when he stopped trying to control outcomes, the outcomes came to him. The matrix brought him back to the top. Kinu became the symbol of someone who attracts because he does not try to attract. The unconscious always operates according to an order oriented toward wholeness. But for that order to function, the person must release the need to control through rational force. When you accept that outcomes do not need to unfold exactly as you want, you enter a different energetic state, open, light, and more confident. You no longer fear rejection, no longer try to make someone like you, no longer force opportunities to arrive at a precise moment. You stand firmly at your center and allow life to respond at its own rhythm. And it is in this state that you naturally attract everything toward you. You attract not because you control, but because you do not need to control. Others are drawn to you because they feel the freedom in your presence. Opportunities appear because you do not suffocate them with fear of loss. Respect comes because you do not demand it as a condition for your stability. The ego must be humble enough to step aside, allowing the deeper order of life to lead. When you no longer cling to outcomes, you enter into cooperation with the unconscious. And from there, the best, truest, and most lasting things find their way to you without being chased. This is magnetism without force, without strategy, without illusion. This is the magnetism of someone who knows that what is theirs will find them in the right moment, in the right way, in the right rhythm. If this section resonates with you, if you have ever realized that you held something too tightly, and only when you released it did life begin reorganizing itself in ways you did not expect, press like on the video as a quiet affirmation that you have stepped a little more into the state of trust. Just a small gesture. But sometimes the smallest gesture is the first step of a deeper inner transformation. At this point, you begin to realize that you are no longer required to be consistent with any image of yourself. And this is one of the most important shifts in magnetism. The ability to allow contradictions to exist within you without fear. Most people lose their magnetism, not because they lack skill or uniqueness, but because they try to play a role too early. Always strong, always calm, always knowing who they are, always maintaining a perfect version of themselves so others won't be disappointed. But that perfection makes them static, closed, and lifeless. Because human nature is not a straight line, but a continuous movement between opposing poles. This is the tension of opposites, the stretch between two psychological poles. The vitality of the soul lies in that tension, not in choosing one side. We are most magnetic. Not when we are always strong, but when we know we can be weak and still remain standing. Not when we are always certain, but when we can be confused without losing ourselves. The greater the tension, the greater is the potential. The greatest tension is the tension between opposites. Inner contradiction creates depth. And depth is the one thing people are truly drawn to. Science confirms this as well. Studies in social neuroscience show that people are attracted to those with variability, flexible shifts in emotional states. The brain responds more strongly to signals with emotional oscillation than to perfect consistency. Absolute steadiness makes others unable to feel the pulse of life within you. In contrast, when you are sometimes strong, sometimes weak, sometimes clear, sometimes uncertain, the nervous system of the person opposite perceives you as a living presence, not a performance. This is called effective realism. We trust genuine emotion more than flawless display. No one is drawn to someone who is always right, always wise, always strong as steel. That is not a person. That is a monument. And monuments are beautiful but distant. Magnetism does not come from immobility, but from the inner aliveness that radiates when you allow opposite poles to exist together. When you dare to acknowledge that you are both strong and weak, both brave and afraid, both wanting to move forward and wanting to pause, you generate a different energetic field, the field of authenticity. Others sense that you are living, moving in conversation with yourself, and that is what makes them want to stay close. Let me tell you the story of Mira, a woman who always carried the image of everything is fine. At work, she solved problems the fastest. In her family, she was the one sought out when difficulties arose. She was admired, trusted, seen as an anchor. But over time, Mira felt her energy draining. Not because she lacked ability, but because she did not allow herself the right to be messy. She believed that if she appeared tired, discouraged, or uncertain, others would be disappointed or leave. Until one afternoon, during a conversation with a close friend, Mira quietly said, "I'm really tired and I don't know where this is going." That sentence seemed simple, but it made the atmosphere strangely more real. Her friend did not withdraw. Instead, she felt closer to Mira than ever. From that moment, Mira realized that when she allowed her imperfection to appear, she became more alive, more relatable, more magnetic. Not because she became weaker, but because she became more whole. The paradox is this: the artificially consistent person, the one always pretending to be fine, loses magnetism the fastest. They create an invisible barrier, a cold glass layer others cannot pass through. While the person who allows contradiction, who allows imperfection, generates a field that makes others feel permitted to be themselves in their presence. That permission is the essence of magnetism. You attract not by making others admire you, but by making them feel safe being who they are. Because when you no longer fear contradiction within yourself, you no longer fear being seen. And when you no longer fear being seen, you begin to show up with a completely different kind of energy. Fuller, deeper, freer. People, opportunities, respect, and connection begin to find you not because you are perfect, but because you are real. And authenticity has a frequency the world unconsciously gravitates toward. If people become most magnetic when they allow contradictions to exist within them, what happens when they begin forcing themselves to be better, grow faster, or heal immediately? And if you are not truly ready, could constantly pushing yourself to move faster be the very thing making you lose the natural life energy? There is no coming to consciousness without pain. But what this means is not the pain of force, but the natural pain of ripening, something that appears only at the right time, cannot be coerced, and cannot be rushed. Modern culture gives us no room to breathe. Every day we are reminded that we must upgrade, read more books, heal another wound, join another self-development course, increase productivity, optimize time, become a better version. We run without knowing where we are running, and we mistake that for progress. But growth is not something you push into happening. Growth is something that occurs when the unconscious is ready. Any forcing that goes against the natural pace of that process causes life energy to withdraw. A woman who had just gone through a major life crisis wrote to the channel about her journey. She threw herself into self-improvement. Meditating daily, journaling, working out, setting goals, tracking progress strictly, she did everything the books teach. But the more she tried to perfect herself, the more exhausted she felt. Not physically exhausted, but the exhaustion of a mind stretched thin. Then one day she stopped and asked herself, am I truly growing, or am I just afraid of falling behind? That question revealed a truth she had avoided. She was not doing these things because she genuinely wanted to, but because she feared not being good enough. When she slowed down and stopped demanding herself to be better than yesterday, her energy began returning. Creativity returned, vitality returned, and she became magnetic in a very natural way because she was no longer consuming her energy by fighting herself. The image of a seed is the perfect metaphor for this. You cannot make a plant grow by pulling its stem, nor can you force it to bloom with worry or measurement. Every seed has its season. If you keep digging up the soil to check its roots, you kill what you are trying to nurture. Humans are the same. Real growth comes from natural ripening, not from the pressure to optimize. Neuroscience echoes this understanding. Studies show that when people constantly force themselves to become a better version, the nervous system enters a state of chronic low-level stress. Cortisol rises slightly, but persistently, reducing baseline dopamine, the chemical that creates natural vitality and motivation. This explains why the more we pressure ourselves, the duller life feels. Life energy does not disappear. It simply withdraws from directions that are no longer aligned. And when life energy withdraws, a person loses their natural radiance. This does not mean you become magnetic by being perfect, but by no longer demanding perfection from yourself. When you stop forcing, the nervous system relaxes. Creative energy returns. Intuition strengthens, and your presence becomes more pleasant in a very primal way. People are drawn to you not because you improve quickly, but because you are no longer fighting yourself. That non-resistance creates a very soft frequency, the frequency of someone who has reconciled with the natural process of life. And precisely when you accept that you do not need to become a better version immediately, something surprising happens. You become more magnetic. Others feel the lightness in you. Opportunities come more easily because you do not radiate urgency. Creative ideas appear because your nervous system is no longer locked by the pressure to progress. You become someone life wants to cooperate with because you are not trying to control its natural timeline. Magnetism is not the result of self-optimization, but the result of inner agreement. You are not fighting yourself. You allow yourself to ripen in your own season. You respect the pace at which your unconscious is operating. And from that state, everything begins to find you. Not because you forced yourself to grow, but because you were calm enough to let your true nature appear. When you look back at this entire journey, you will see that magnetism has never come from techniques or strategies. It comes from a way of thinking that makes you move like a steady current within a turbulent world. Not reacting impulsively. Not negotiating with your true self. Not projecting your power outward. Not running with the collective unconscious. Not suffocating life with control. Not resisting your natural contradictions. And not forcing yourself to grow before your season. And then one day you will notice something very quiet. Precisely when you stop trying to become a magnetic person, magnetism appears, not loud, not showy, just a kind of inner gravity that makes others pause for a moment when you walk into a room because they sense in you something they are unconsciously seeking, an undivided presence. If you want to go deeper into the mindset that can change how the world responds to you, share this video with someone who needs it and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future parts in this exploration of psychological depth. This is not a journey to become someone else, but to become the place where everything right naturally finds its way.